On the evening of January 27, 2017, a frantic call came into Kitsap County emergency dispatchers. A teenage boy's voice, desperate and afraid, told them his whole family had been shot. Hunter Shapp, just 16 years old, was calling from his family's home near Lake Tahoe in Seabeck, Washington. He begged them to hurry, telling them he was dying. By the time first responders arrived just minutes later, the house was engulfed in flames. Inside, they would find Hunter, his brother Jonathan Higgins, and his mother, Crystal Carriaga, all dead. The family patriarch, 43-year-old John Carriaga, was missing. 2 days later, on January 29th, a property caretaker at a remote tree farm in Mason County made a grim discovery. John Carriaga's body was found inside his burned Ford F-150 pickup truck, miles from his home. The entire family had been murdered, their bodies deliberately burned in an apparent attempt to destroy evidence. What had happened to this blended family who ran a successful Mexican restaurant in Bremerton? The answer would take more than 5 years to uncover, and when it did, it would reveal a world of cocaine trafficking, motorcycle club politics, and a murder plot over money and drugs. The Carriagas seemed like an ordinary family. John and Crystal had married in 2009, bringing together their 2 teenage sons from previous relationships. Hunter was John's son, while Jonathan was Crystal's. Together, they owned and operated Crystal's Java Hut and Juanito's Taco Shop, a thriving restaurant that made them respected members of their community. But beneath this veneer of normalcy, John Carriaga had been living a double life. According to investigators, he was dealing cocaine on the side, transporting drugs from California and selling them to customers in Washington. Among those customers were members of the Bandidos Motorcycle Club, a self-proclaimed outlaw organization with a long history of criminal activity. The investigation into what happened that night would become one of the most complex and lengthy cases in Kitsap County history. According to court records and witness testimony, the evening began with John receiving a phone call while guests were visiting the family home. He went outside to meet someone, telling his family he would return shortly. He came back to the property but never entered the house. One guest went to the garage to check on him and heard 3 men talking in loud voices. What happened next was methodical and brutal. Prosecutors would later argue that 3 men had come to the Carriaga home with a plan. Robert Watson III, known as Bobby, was a fully patched member of the Bandidos Motorcycle Club and allegedly the mastermind behind the murders. His younger brother Johnny Watson, who was not affiliated with the club, and Danny Kelly Jr., a hang-around associate seeking membership in the Bandidos, completed the trio. The prosecution's theory was that John Carriaga had stopped supplying cocaine to the Bandidos members, creating a conflict that would prove fatal. The killers worked quickly. They shot Crystal, then Jonathan, and finally Hunter, who investigators believe had been walking inside with a pizza when the attack began. He was shot in the driveway and left for dead. But Hunter was still alive, and in his final moments, he managed to make that crucial call to 911. The call ended abruptly, and investigators believe the gunman either destroyed his phone or ended the call themselves before shooting him a final time in the head. The attackers then set fires at opposite ends of the house, using fire starter logs soaked in accelerant. They threw large rocks through the windows to fuel the flames. John Carriaga was taken away alive, driven to that remote tree farm, and killed there, his truck also set ablaze. For years, the case seemed destined to go unsolved. Investigators identified persons of interest early on, particularly Danny Kelly, who was captured on surveillance footage at a Silverdale Target store wearing Bandidos supporter clothing just days before the murders. That footage would prove significant. Kelly had purchased a prepaid burner phone, which he used almost exclusively to communicate with John Carriaga for 10 days leading up to the murders. Those calls stopped shortly before the killings, even though the phone didn't expire until April. Other evidence slowly accumulated. Robert Watson III arrived at another club member's house at approximately 4 in the morning the day after the murders, missing his pants. He asked to borrow clothes and clean himself up, claiming he'd gotten into a fight. The next evening, he called police to report his truck had been broken into days earlier and a handgun stolen from it. When investigators examined Watson's financial records, they found something troubling. He had stopped going to work at Kitsap County Public Works and was eventually fired in September 2017. Yet that year, more than $300,000 was deposited into his accounts through numerous cash deposits from unidentified sources. The crime scene itself told a story. When investigators entered the burned house, they found something the killers had missed. In the master bedroom, there was $50,000 in cash hidden in a strongbox and another $7,000 in a money bag. No evidence of forced entry, no evidence of a struggle. The killers apparently never found the money they may have been looking for. John Carriaga's attorney would later tell investigators that Carriaga had hidden hundreds of thousands of dollars underneath his home, but that money was never recovered. Despite these leads, no arrests were made for over 5 years. The investigation involved the Kitsap County Sheriff's Office, the FBI, and multiple other agencies. Detectives interviewed hundreds of people, collected thousands of pieces of evidence, and built their case piece by piece. The breakthrough came through cell phone tower data and witness testimony. Prosecutors were able to show that Robert Watson had lured John Carriaga away from his home before the murders. Phone records placed all 3 defendants at key locations at crucial times. In June 2022, 5 years after the murders, approximately 70 police officers executed coordinated arrests across multiple counties. Robert Watson III, Johnny Watson, and Danny Kelly Jr. were taken into custody and charged with multiple counts of murder and arson. Each was held on $20 million bail. The trial began with jury selection in November 2023, with opening statements following in early December. It would become a marathon proceeding, lasting 5 months. The prosecution presented over 1,800 pieces of evidence. The jury took a bus tour of significant sites connected to the case. They heard testimony from investigators, witnesses, and experts. The defense worked to cast doubt on the timeline and the reliability of cell phone tower evidence. They argued there was no physical evidence linking their clients to the crimes, no proof of robbery, no evidence that anything was taken from the Carriaga home. They called the case speculation built upon speculation. On April 5, 2024, after a full week of deliberations, the jury reached its verdict. All 3 men were found guilty on all 10 felony charges, including 4 counts of premeditated first-degree murder, 4 counts of first-degree murder, attempted murder, and first-degree arson. As the judge read the verdict, family members of the victims wept with relief. The defendants showed no visible reaction. In May 2024, all 3 men were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For the surviving family members, the verdict brought a measure of peace after 7 years of grief and uncertainty. Hunter's brave 911 call have been instrumental in the investigation, preserving crucial evidence and establishing the timeline of the murders. The case demonstrated the importance of persistent investigation and the collaboration between multiple law enforcement agencies. It also revealed the tragic consequences when the worlds of drug dealing and organized crime collide with innocent lives. The Carriaga murders stand as one of Kitsap County's most horrific cases, a reminder that evil can hide behind ordinary facades and that justice, though sometimes delayed, can ultimately prevail. On the morning of September 22, 1991, a body was discovered in a vacant lot near the intersection of 7th Street and McKinney Avenue in Waco, Texas. The victim was 28-year-old Rita Davis, a local woman and mother of a young daughter. She had been beaten to death, her pants and underwear removed. The crime scene suggested a violent struggle, and medical examiners would soon determine that she had suffered blunt force trauma to her head and a hemorrhage to her neck. Evidence collected during a sexual assault examination would prove crucial, but it would take more than 3 decades before technology could unlock its secrets. Rita Davis was a woman trying to navigate a difficult life. Like many in her community, she struggled with addiction, specifically to crack cocaine. On the night of September 21st, she had been with Harold Givens, a man she frequently dated, along with 2 other friends. The 4 had been smoking crack cocaine together when an argument erupted between Rita and Harold. The specifics of what sparked the confrontation remain unclear, but witnesses said the 2 friends left Rita and Harold alone. When they returned, both Rita and Harold were gone. No one could have imagined that Rita Davis would never be seen alive again. The next morning brought the grim discovery. Rita's body lay in that vacant lot, the victim of a brutal beating. Waco Police Department detectives immediately began their investigation, interviewing the friends who had been present the night before. Harold Givens quickly emerged as a person of interest. He admitted to being with Rita that night, but claimed they had only engaged in oral sex. The 2 friends who had been present gave conflicting accounts of when the argument between Rita and Harold had occurred. One friend said the fight happened on Tuesday, September 17th, while the other insisted it was on Saturday, September 21st, the night before Rita's body was found. Detectives working the case in 1991 did everything by the book. They collected blood samples and a saliva swab from Harold Givens. They gathered evidence from the crime scene. They conducted thorough interviews. But they hit a wall that would prove insurmountable at the time. The DNA technology available in the early 1990s was primitive compared to what exists today. The samples collected from both Rita Davis and Harold Givens could not be definitively connected. Without that crucial link, prosecutors had no case. There were suspicions, certainly, and Givens remained a person of interest, but suspicion alone cannot secure a conviction. The case went cold. For Rita's family, the pain was unbearable. Her daughter, Lucretia Franklin, was just 9 years old when she lost her mother. She would later recall the moment she learned her mother would never come home, saying the world simply stopped. Lucretia grew up without answers, without closure, without justice. But she made a promise to her mother, a vow that she would fight for her until her last breath. That promise would sustain her through 30 decades of waiting, hoping, and believing that someday the truth would come to light. The case sat dormant for years, filed away in boxes with thousands of other unsolved crimes. But cold cases are never truly forgotten. In 2006, a detective revisited the Rita Davis file. Advances in DNA technology had been making headlines across the country. Cases once thought unsolvable were being cracked open. The detective decided to retest the samples that had been collected 15 years earlier. Using these more advanced DNA techniques, the results came back with new information. The major DNA profile was consistent with Rita Davis, as expected, but critically, a minor DNA profile came back consistent with Harold Givens. It was progress, but still not definitive enough to build a case that would stand up in court. The technology had improved, but it had not improved enough. The case remained cold, but now there was a glimmer of hope. 16 more years passed. Harold Givens continued living in Waco, his life moving forward while Rita Davis remained frozen in time, forever 28 years old. But in 2022, cold case detectives took another look at the file. DNA technology had advanced exponentially since 2006. What had been impossible in 1991 and uncertain in 2006 was now clear and definitive. The DNA evidence collected at the scene proved that Harold Givens had sexual intercourse with Rita Davis the night she died. Armed with this concrete scientific evidence, detectives decided it was time to confront Givens once again. The re-interview was strategic. The cold case detective and a special crimes detective sat down with the now 65-year-old Givens and laid out the facts. They informed him that his original statement about only having oral sex with Rita Davis was demonstrably false. The DNA results proved there had been vaginal intercourse. Faced with irrefutable scientific evidence, Givens' story began to change. He admitted that he had become angry with Rita Davis that night. According to his confession, she had asked him for more crack cocaine, and his rage overtook him. He struck her with his closed fists, hitting her multiple times. The beating was so severe that it caused the blunt force trauma and hemorrhaging that killed her. On June 21, 2022, officers from the Waco Police Department arrived at Harold Givens' residence. He was arrested without incident and charged with murder. The announcement sent shockwaves through the community. A 30-year-old cold case had finally been solved. For Lucretia Franklin, the call she had waited 30 decades to receive had finally come. The daughter who had promised to fight for her mother until her last breath could finally see justice within reach. In September 2022, a McLennan County grand jury returned an enhanced murder indictment against Harold Gene Givens. The indictment alleged that he had repeatedly struck Rita Davis in the face with his hands, causing her death. The path to trial seemed clear. Justice, though delayed by 30 decades, appeared inevitable. But the case would take yet another unexpected turn. By 2025, Harold Givens was no longer the 65-year-old man who had been arrested 3 years earlier. At 68, his health had deteriorated significantly. He had developed dementia, a cruel twist that raised legal questions about his ability to stand trial. In June 2025, Givens was brought into Waco's 19th State District Court in a wheelchair, assisted by family members and caregivers. A psychological evaluation was conducted by Waco psychologist Lee Carter, who determined that Givens was no longer competent to understand the criminal proceedings against him or to assist him in his own defense. Judge Thomas West faced a difficult decision. In most cases where defendants are deemed incompetent to stand trial, they are sent to a state mental facility in hopes of regaining competency. But Givens's case was different. His dementia was progressive and irreversible. There was no facility that could restore his mental capacity. Judge West ordered Givens, who had been free on bond, returned to jail, while his family and attorney worked to find a locked-down nursing facility that could care for him. The legal proceedings ground to a halt. The Rita Davis case stands as a testament to both the power and the limitations of justice. For 30 years, science struggled to catch up with the evidence. When it finally did, delivering the proof needed to solve the case, time had moved on in a different way. The suspect's mind had deteriorated to the point where holding him accountable became legally impossible. It is a frustrating end to a case that took so long to solve, yet it also demonstrates the relentless dedication of law enforcement officers who never stopped working to find answers. The Waco Police Department publicly acknowledged the work done by detectives in 1991, 1992, and 2006. Without their initial investigative work and their careful preservation of evidence, the arrest in 2022 would never have been possible. They collected samples at a time when the technology did not exist to analyze them properly, trusting that someday science would advance enough to reveal their secrets. That faith was rewarded, even if the final chapter did not unfold as anyone had hoped. For Lucretia Franklin and the rest of Rita's family, the resolution is bittersweet. They know who killed Rita. They have a confession. They have scientific proof. But they will never see Harold Givens held fully accountable in a court of law. The justice they sought for 30 decades remains incomplete. Yet there is also closure in knowing the truth, in having their mother's case solved, in fulfilling that promise to fight until the end. Rita Davis has not been forgotten. Her case exemplifies how cold cases can be solved through persistence, advancing technology, and the determination of both investigators and family members who refuse to let victims become statistics. Even when justice cannot be fully served, the truth still matters.